Welcome back to the Mina Show featuring Lenny, only NFL podcasts. One of the hosts thinks if you run into the teeth of the defense, you're probably going to get bit. That's Lenny. He doesn't actually bite. Mina Kimes. It is time for my annual top 10 offenses prediction show. I am so happy to be joined by the bad boy of NFL internet.
I'll take it.
Frequent guest on this show, although it's been a minute, Steven Ruiz. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me. That's quite the introduction. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to the hype. How do I be a bad boy on this podcast?
I don't think you can. Well, I don't know. We haven't talked about who your top 10 is. You have a tendency to make waves with your quarterback rankings. I don't know about offense rankings.
We'll try.
I don't think I'm looking at my picks. I have a few provocative choices. I think I found it, Steven, same as last year, a lot easier to pick offenses and defenses. I'll start there. But however, I found it difficult to narrow it down from about 13 or 14 to 10. Was that your experience as well?
I had trouble with like 16 teams, getting them down to 10. I had like 8 or 9 I felt like had to be in there. And then like the last 2 I could kind of mess around with. And even then it was like 10 teams. I was like, one of these is going to end up in the top 10. I'm going to look like an idiot after this. But comes with the territory.
Well, I'm looking at the 2023-2024, so last season's DVO rankings, and trying to think like who did I really miss on? So it went Niners, Dolphins, Bills, Ravens, Lions, Packers, Rams, Chiefs, Cowboys, and then Eagles. All of those I was pretty high on, except for the one that jumps out is the Rams. But that was because I thought Matthew Stafford was like in a weekend at Bernie's out there, and instead he came out and completely blew everyone out of the water. Were there any of the top 10 I just listed, was there any team that you didn't see being as good as they were?
No, I'm with you. And I think this just speaks to how consistent offenses are year to year. This is like what the nerds tell us. Offenses are consistent, defenses are volatile. And I think this speaks to it. Like I said, it was hard narrowing it down to 10. And I think a lot of that was me kind of having nostalgia for what offenses used to be. And like, I was like, oh, I could see this team, recapturing the magic from 2 years ago and being a top 10 offense. But it's harder to do that with defense. It's way harder to do that.
Actually, the teams just outside the top 10 last year, I think, are more interesting because you had the Bengals at 11, which is remarkable considering you only got half a season from Joe Burrow. So we're going to talk. Spoiler alert, I'm going to bring up the Bengals. The Seahawks 12, that one's not too surprising. But then you had the Colts and the Texans, both of which I think neither of us probably predicted would be top 10 offenses, certainly, and they were just outside. One of those, of course, had to do with the arrival of CJ Stroud. I'm very curious to see if he makes your top 10, if the Texans make your top 10. And then the other is Shane Steichen. That's what we call
my guy.
Guys. Okay, let's get going. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to sort of reveal to you, we're going to do the first half. I'm going to start with number 1 rather than a group because I suspect we both have the same number 1. So this is a prediction of the top 10 offenses for the 2024 NFL season. Do you have the Niners at 1 too? Well?
I have the Niners at 1. I almost went bad boy here and went with another team at number 1, but you have to pick the 49ers, even with all the question marks. Yeah. Their full floor is just so high compared to everyone else in the league.
Well, what question marks I think is maybe the best way to look at the San Francisco 49ers because they're just such a complete roster. They didn't really lose talent on offense. They in fact, added a first round draft pick in Ricky Pearsall. They drafted a guard who's I guess going to be a backup, but for the most part, it's going to look exactly like it looked last year, barring a super shocking trade of Deebo Samuel, maybe even at a midseason point. So I guess my question is like, is there any reason to believe they won't repeat what we saw last season, which it's not even worth listing stats for the Niners because they're just first in everything. They blew the NFL out of the water.
Every split too. First down, second down, third down, play action, no play action, shotgun, understand, like everything. But my one concern with them is game script. Even last year, and that's the question with the Kyle Shanahan offense every year, regardless of talent. But last year, 52.8 pass rate, lowest in the league. They had 5 games over that in the regular season. They went 1-4, and it was all the losses you think of when you think of their low points. And so I want to know what this team looks like when they're behind the chains, when they're behind the game script. I know a team in Kansas City that has no problem playing like that. I know a team in Cincinnati that, when healthy, has no problem playing like that. With San Francisco, that's always going to be a question until we see it. And it was a question last year when they were at their highest.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I will say I remember the first half of the Niner season last year when they fell behind, when they were in third down. You saw the numbers drop off, but you did see some improvement in some of those metrics as the year went on. I think the game script stuff, it's a little bit tricky because the defenses that they did struggle against, and it was some of it had to do with players who were injured at points during the season last year, were also the best defenses in the NFL.
Right.
And I guess that's just if I have a question for them, it's, when you go up against a defense like the Browns or the Chiefs, who can play man coverage at such a high level, or a defense like the Ravens, where they're so strong up the spine and they actually have the linebackers to hang, can you win? I think they can. We're poking holes here. I guess the only other question I have is if we're going to see any continued evolution, because this is an offense that has changed and evolved over the years. It's one of the reasons why I think we're both so high on Kyle Shanahan. It's not just that like he is not a one-trick pony. The run game has continued to evolve. The passing attack has changed as well. Is there another version to be unlocked? It feels like kind of a silly question, though, because it doesn't feel necessary. So I guess it's only when they go up against those types of defenses, is there a next iteration of this offense?
Yeah, that's the question with them. Like, for me, the hard part in picking a number one was, do I want to win a game in January? Do I want to win the Super Bowl, all things being equal? Or do I want to, win 18 games? Do I want a team that's going to be good over the 18-game stretch? And I think that's the question with them. When you get into January is where you have to deal with the issues, when you have to run into a Baltimore, a Kansas City, when you have to run into better quarterbacks and better defenses. But I do think that's where they can evolve. And I think it's just finding kind of a mid-range game. I think you saw this in Houston, who run a similar offense, obviously, with Bobby Slowick, where they're going to do the condensed stuff. They're going to do like the empty spread stuff that we see in Miami, we see in San Francisco. But what Houston could do because of Stroud was they could do the mid-range. They could do like the more traditional drop back stuff. They can get into 3-by-1. They can get into gun, kind of like Cincinnati, and fill in those gaps when this game script goes against them. We haven't seen that out of San Francisco, and it's been a criticism of Kyle Shanahan in the past. His drop back passing game isn't as robust as his early down stuff. And I think that's where you could see the evolution. And we've seen it in other places. We've seen Sean McVay do it when he got Matthew Stafford. So it's really a question of like, what can Brock Purdy, how can he execute those concepts, which I think he'll be fine at. I don't think he'll get in too much trouble with the protections they have around him. And then can Kyle dial it up? And I have no reason to suspect that he can't. I just don't think it's something he's had to do in San Francisco. When he was in Atlanta, we saw more of that mid-range game with Matt Ryan.
They averaged 10 yards per play out of empty last year.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, all of the numbers are insane. They're a machine. I think, the only other thing that comes to mind, for the X Factors pod, Marshall Newhouse picked Trent Williams more as a, like, if you take him out, that's the biggest issue. And I tend to agree with that. But again, I don't even like, it's not worth, being worried about because he shows zero signs of decline and he's been fairly durable. But that would be the one player where I'd be a little bit worried, to your point, because of the drop back game. And also because, this is not outside of Williams. There are certainly deficiencies, particularly at the tackle position, which they don't have a lot of depth, but we're picking the nittiest of nits.
You have to with this team. Like, it's an injury-based thing. Any concern with them is an injury-based question because it's Christian McCaffrey, who has had trouble staying healthy in the past, and obviously he's going to be a workhorse. Trent Williams, same thing. George Kittle has gotten banged up in the past. Deebo Samuel has had problems with injuries. Their usage plus their injury history gives you the concern, but like for a top 10 projection pod, you're kind of like, why are you bringing that up? There's no need to bring up injuries.
Do you know Josh Dobbs is their backup now?
I did not know that.
Yeah. Kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Okay. I think I have one of my spicier picks is 2.
Same.
I had the Los Angeles Rams.
Ooh, that was not the team. I was going to go with the Chiefs, but let's talk about the Rams. I want to talk about the Rams.
Okay. Rams offense last year. So I said, we can throw out some of the Niners stats because they're first in everything. However, when Matthew Stafford and Kyron Williams both played, the Rams tied the Niners in EPA per play. And then finished top 3 in just about every other possible metric: first down rate, success rate, yards per play, all of it. When those two players played, and then certainly when Nakua and Kupp were also healthy as well, this Rams offense was an absolute buzzsaw. You want to talk about the Ravens and some of the difficulty that they give the Niners? You know who did not have difficulty with the Ravens defense? Matthew Stafford and this Rams run game. I cannot get that first drive that the Rams put on the Ravens out of my mind, where they just slammed the ball downhill into them, ran duo, and destroyed them. And then for a reason, stopped running it when they got to the red zone. But that doesn't matter. My point is this. I see no reason to believe that this won't continue to be an unbelievably dominant run game, given the fact that because the passing game is so robust and frightening with this wide receiver group, they do face a ton of light boxes. They are willing to run into them. They run into light boxes at the second highest rate in football. And when they do, they're incredibly dominant. And then they double down on it, investing in the interior of the offensive line even more and drafting another running back, Blake Corum, who is sort of duplicative of Kyron Williams' skill set. I think that's why they went to him, just wanting to hedge against injuries. I feel like they have established not only like a very clear and kind of interesting identity, but one that matches up really well with some of the elite defenses around the league.
Yeah, and I think one of their issues, which I don't think is going to be an issue necessarily this year, was a lack of explosive plays. They were top 10 in offense, but they were 17th in explosive plays, which is like what you think of with McVay. Yeah. The interesting thing is when they got the explosive plays, they averaged the most yards in the NFL. They averaged over 25 yards per explosive play. And they were also top 10 in drives with at least one explosive play in them. So I think there's some regression, some positive regression coming for them, especially with Sean McVay. If you had another year of Matthew Stafford being healthy, that elbow being healthy, that back being healthy, the offensive line upgrades they had in the offseason, like you said, Kyron Williams playing a full season. And I think arguably this could be the best receiving core Sean McVay has had if Cooper Kupp is healthy, which is a big if. But if he is healthy, a year removed from that injury, and Puka Nacua just carries over what he did last year when he was maybe the greatest rookie of all time, like most productive receiving rookie of all time, I could see number 2. I really could. I had them at 6 on my list, but
6. Wow.
I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised. I'm a big Matthew Stafford fan, as you know.
Why did you? Let me ask you this before we get your 2. What was your concern that had you? Is it more just that you saw 4 other offenses that you thought were better, or was there anything particular that worried you? Is it just the injuries?
Age.
Yeah.
It's the age and injuries with them. And we haven't seen the offensive line gel yet. And like the one thing with McVay, he's kept this offense afloat no matter what the personnel is. But the one thing we haven't seen him really overcome too much is like a bad offensive line. I'm not saying the offensive line is going to be bad. I just think it's in the range of outcomes.
Yeah. I think the other thing that comes to mind is like watching Stafford, like not only was he awesome last year and made some of the most insane throws of any quarterback in the league. He also was kind of mobile. I'm not saying Stafford's a mobile quarterback, but there were a few plays where he escaped pressure and either created or ran in for a first down. And I was like, oh, you look pretty chipper.
It was a thing. I remember Jordan Rodriguez was like tweeting about it early on. It was like, oh, scrambling Matthew Stafford. And it showed up like the first couple of weeks. It was definitely a thing. And that was the one thing that I thought held him back from the elite tier of quarterbacks. I'm not saying he's elite, by the way. I'm just saying like he has a lot of the skills that the elite guys have. Like he does the no-look stuff. He does the off-platform stuff. He has the big-time arm. But with him, I feel like he was never able to extend plays. He was able to speed up his process with like the no-look stuff because he can move guys out of the way. He can throw around pass rushers. But he was never able to like really extend time. And I think we did see that kind of get unlocked a little bit. He wasn't Lamar Jackson by any means, but any addition to his skill set, which is robust already, is welcome. And I think it could push him into a spot where he's like a top 6 quarterback next year. He's not going to like challenge Mahomes or Allen, but if he's healthy and his receivers are healthy, like I could see him put up MVP type numbers next year.
That's an interesting, I don't know what the MVP odds are, but I think that would be an interesting bet. And especially given the situation they're putting him in with the dominant run game and then a very stout interior offensive line in particular. It seems like they're optimizing this phase of Matthew Stafford. Did you have the Chiefs at 2 then? You said you thought about them at 1.
Yeah, I did. I almost put them at 1.
I had them at 3. So we can talk about the Chiefs. It's funny, right? Because last year I mentioned the top. I think they finished 8th, right, in DVOA. I mentioned it. Yeah, 8th. So the assumption this year is with the investments that they've made in wide receiver, drafting Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, they'll get back to being one of the best offenses in the NFL. Are you buying into like the fact that the Chiefs are going to come out and be bombs away again? Is this just entirely a bet on Mahomes for you? What are your thoughts about this version of the Chiefs offense? Because we've seen so many versions of it over the years.
With everything that's going on off the field, notwithstanding, like with Rashee Rice, like part of the reason I'm so optimistic is what we saw out of Rashee Rice in the postseason and what we saw out of Travis Kelce in the postseason. Because I think a big part of their issues last year was Travis Kelce was not Travis Kelce for the first 3 months of the season. He was banged up. He had an ankle injury, I think, against the Vikings. And I don't know if he ever recovered from that. But the way they used him even, you remember like when Tyreek was there and they were at their height, the formation you always thought of with them was Travis Kelce isolated on the opposite side of trips with like Tyreek Hill at number 3 on the other side.
3-1, yeah.
Guess how many receptions Travis Kelce had while isolated last year?
How many?
1.
What?
He had 1. He caught. I was shocked. I looked it up yesterday. I looked it up and I was shocked. I had to double check. I checked several different sources. He had 1 catch for 23 yards during the regular season while isolated on the backside of trips. In 2019, he had 40 catches or 28 catches for 391 yards. Like that's been the biggest change.
Do you think that is like we don't want to put Travis Kelce one-on-one with the other team's best shutdown corner, or do you think it's we don't like any of the receivers. We don't trust any of the other receivers around Travis Kelce. So if we isolate him, defenses have an easy time because they can just focus on him.
I think it's like a combination of things. I think it was load management partly. If you look up at like his snap counts on first and second down, he wasn't playing on first down a lot. They were saving his legs, I think, for January and like using him on third down most of the time. So I think that's part of it. And then I think it's what you said. They didn't trust the receivers. They had Justin Watson. He was like the ISO X receiver in those situations instead of Kelce. Wasn't very productive. They were like minus 10 EPA on the season out of trips, which had always been like their strength as an offense. So crazy. I think if they get Kelce back and Rice kind of emerges as another guy who could play that role, and I think Hollywood Brown can play that role. He's played that role in the past. You have 3 guys you can kind of isolate. I think that adds that layer back to their offense. And then the offense has improved over the years. Like they're better at running the ball. I think they're more physical up front. And I think that's going to continue. If you can get that deep ball, which they didn't have last year, if you can get that back, I think we'll see them return to the top of like the EPA charts next year.
Yeah. I mean, last year, Patrick Mahomes faced the most quarters coverage of any full season starter, large part because defenses did not fear this Chiefs offense stretching the field. Of course, they ranked near the bottom of the NFL. I think at the bottom of the NFL and average depth of target. I suspect it'll go back to, I guess it was 2021 was the last Tyreek year when they faced all the too high, right? If I remember correctly, it was when, yes, it was right before they traded
21,
him. Yeah. So I think we'll see more of that. And obviously that'll create a lot of space for both Kelce and Rice to work underneath. I think for a number of reasons, and this is kind of why I was like, I can't put them 1. And why I actually think I'm a little bit higher on the Rams. I think the Chiefs offense isn't going to look as good as it can until the second half of the season.
That's fair, yeah.
It's, not just with the Rice suspension likely looming, but also if they do actually roll out a rookie at left tackle, it might be also Wanya Morris, who's played. We'll see what happens there. There could be some, like a few bumpy performances early on, but by the end of the season, I expect them to be rolling.
That's why I kind of made the distinction between January and like the 18 game season. If it was just January, I would have put the Chiefs number 1 and not thought twice about it. But like left tackle is going to be concerned. They want a rookie to be starting out. If Wanya Morris is starting at left tackle, like that's a loss for the Chiefs.
Okay. Who do you have at number 3? I want to know.
This is going to be my spiciest pick. I think I picked the Texans. I picked the Houston Texans. I'm all in.
Really?
I picked the Houston Texans, and let me explain why. Because I had like a glut of the I don't know how to like bucket these teams, these offenses. I would say like they're all Shanahan McVay guys, but they're not all that. Like Ben Johnson is not part of that staff, but I think they're all cover 3 merchants. They all need cover 3. They need what they want to see cover 3 from the defense. I think San Francisco needs it. Miami needs it. Detroit needs it. Houston is the one team that I don't think, the one Shanahan offense that doesn't need it. And I think it's because of Stroud. And I think we saw how like they were like a mid offense last year, right? They were like 16th in EPA.
Yeah.
But they were third. They were they were third in explosive play rate.
Yeah.
Despite that. So I think Bobby Slowick can like draw up all the explosives that you get from a Shanahan offense, but he also has the drop back game with CJ Stroud, who every time I watch him, I don't know about you, but I move him up my quarterback rankings every time I watch him. He gets better every time. I go back and watch their film.
So I had the Texans in the second half. I had them 9th, and it killed me, but I just kept struggling to move teams down. I think you make some very good points. Obviously, this group of pass catchers is extremely good with Collins, Diggs, Tank Dell as your top 3. I think Dalton Schultz is like an underrated tight end as well, by the way. And there's no way that the run game, I think that for me, aside from CJ Stroud being amazing, 2 reasons why you wouldn't expect them to improve, in addition to the improvements that they've made. This offensive line, I think I've talked about it here, was not just the most injured offensive line in football last year. Football Outsiders had them the most injured offensive line ever in the
it was historic
era. So one would think that would help, and it would certainly help the run game, which was an absolute nightmare last season, ranked at the bottom of the NFL in just about every category. And it was bad. It was bad both in terms of the blocking, which, cuts to the offensive line injuries, but also the backs just didn't run well. Singletary had a few okay games, but they ranked near the bottom of the NFL in rushing yards over expected. Now they faced a lot of heavy boxes, which was mostly derived from the fact that Bobby Slowick just ran the ball so much on first down. And I think that certainly helped the passing game. I think that's something we're going to see evolve this year. And I think that's kind of my biggest question mark is, okay, will Slowick tweak that run pass balance given, the personnel at his disposal? And then what does that do for the run game? Does it make it better as a result?
Yeah, the reason I'm optimistic about this is because we kind of saw him do it as the season wore on. I think he was still a little too committed to the bit. Even in the playoffs, like that Ravens game, they had nothing for the Ravens, and he didn't have any adjustments that I saw. But I do think he started to add more to the drop back game when he realized that like this early down stuff, like the foundation of the Shanahan offense isn't really working for us and giving us what we need on a down to down basis. It was producing the explosives.
Play action, by the way, it was like,
sorry.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. Like they weren't really, it was a bad Shanahan offense with a good quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think this year it's going to be a good Shanahan offense with a great quarterback. And I think that's the reason why we're going to see their production just explode. If you look at their like in rhythm stuff, like when CJ Stroud was able to take the snap, hit the back of his drop, and the ball was coming out, he was putting up numbers like Brock Purdy was. And there were 3 offenses at the top of the list in that regard: Miami, San Francisco, and Houston. And what's the connection with all of them? It's the Shanahan offense. So I think this year you're going to see more of the scheme kind of do more of the heavy lifting.
What do you think is behind, just some of their splits are kind of interesting. But sorry, I kind of mumbled this. I did want to register my disagreement about the Niners offense being overly, they destroyed every kind of coverage. And
in spirit, they want a cover 3 environment is what they want.
No, Niners fans don't get mad. We both had them as unanimous number 1. The Texans offense last year had some interesting splits with Stroud, one of which was they were way, way better against zone coverage and split safety coverage versus, as opposed to man and single high, versus split safety, 0.2 EPA per play, which was the best in the entire NFL, versus single high, 17th. And you saw sort of those numbers continue from the start to the end of the season. What would you attribute that to?
I mean, that's a pass catcher stat, right? Like I always say, if you want to beat the quarterback, you play zone. If you want to beat his supporting cast, you play man. Like there's nothing you could do as a quarterback except for like throw a perfect pass to beat perfect man coverage. You can't, whereas in zone, someone's going to be open. There's always holes in the zone. So I think that's what it speaks to. And I think that's a big reason why they got Stephon Diggs, who will help in that regard immediately. And I want to say one thing. I think there's been some talk about like Stephon Diggs maybe being a little washed because of the second half. Obviously, after Joe Brady, he registered like his fastest miles per hour, according to Next Gen Stats, in the second half of last year, compared to any time he was with Buffalo. Like going back to 2020, he was even faster in 2023.
The only thing that I would say, if I had two concerns, one is Slowick. I'm like, okay, are you gonna, continue evolving, and also can you, now that you have this like killer group of pass catchers, will you stop running the ball so much on first down? And then the other thing is the how shall we put this, personality aspect of dropping Stephon Diggs into what has been a kumbaya situation with, these fun, really talented young pass catchers and young quarterbacks. Just there could be some dissatisfaction if maybe he's not getting Nico Collins' target share. So we'll see.
I've seen CJ Stroud handle Micah Parsons on these podcasts. Have you seen the offseason content? I feel like that has like inflated my sense of what the Texans are going to be, just seeing CJ Stroud handle all this.
We did an entire Around the Horn segment on CJ Stroud saying all of his subtle perceived Aaron Rodgers disses on, I forgot who went on a podcast, and he said he'd rather have Eli's career, which is like, yeah, because he's the Super Bowls. Tom Brady, we know how he treats his teammates. We don't know Rodgers. And then Matthew Stafford would have had rings, which is just pure film guy posting there with the Matthew Stafford comment.
Yeah, I support it I support the spirit of what he's saying, especially about Rodgers. I don't agree with him. I think Rodgers is a very good quarterback and got the most out of that situation, but I do support the spirit. And if you're big up in Matthew Stafford, I'm supporting you. Okay,
so I thought I have a spicy one for 4. Oh, I don't know. 4 through I really struggled with. Pardon me. Did I skip 3? No, I have the Ram. Oh no, I already did the Chiefs. You have the Chiefs at 2, and you have, okay. So yes, so I have the Niners, the Rams, the Chiefs. Can you guess my number 4 team? This is I people will not agree with this.
I want to say the Packers, but I feel like that's not too spicy
5.
to take.
I have them at 5.
I got nothing.
I got the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, okay.
Where do you have the Baltimore Ravens?
I have them 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. 7th.
Okay. So a lot of things went into this thought process. I think there are correct concerns about the departures on the offensive line. I like Rosengarten, who's the right tackle that I assume he's going to start, who they drafted from Washington. But it's, I thought this offensive line was pretty underrated last season. We didn't talk about them enough. I thought they did a really good job. I also, when we talked about the quarterback draft, I talked a little bit about Lamar Jackson and his play under pressure, in particular, just by the end of the season, what a nightmare he was for 4-man rushes. And I think that he will compensate for a lot of that. But for me, this bet is really a bet on like year 2 with Todd Monken, because by the end of the season, I know we were all like very angry about the final game, but when I kind of looked back on how this offense evolved and some of the different tweaks that he made and the way he built on Greg Roman's run game, expanded it, the way he integrated the run and the pass, in particular with the RPO and their play action passing attacks, there was a lot that I liked.
Yeah.
It's a offense that actually finished 2nd in weighted DVOA, by the way, on offense, and then 5th in success rate, which tied the Dolphins. So there's a number of things that I could talk about here, but one thing that I really was interested in looking back on was just kind of the use of personnel groupings and the run pass splits out of them, because with Greg Roman, it was always like so obvious, if they were in 11, they were passing it. If they were in heavy groups, they were running the ball. Yeah. And they did it at a really high level. But I think with Monken, and important point here, the Ravens personnel groupings can be a little bit misleading because Patrick Card was basically a tight end, in this offense last year. So when we say 21 personnel, which they used a lot, it's really kind of a modified 12. But going from comparing 2022 to 2023. So when they were in 21 personnel, or pardon me, 12 personnel back with Greg Roman, they passed 82% of the time and were not very good at it, negative 0.03 EPA per play. When they were in 12 this year, it was a 50-50 run pass rate, and they averaged 0.57 EPA per pass, which is insane. And we knew, by the way, Todd Monken coming from Georgia was really good at those 12 personnel. And that's, by the way, with only half a season of Mark Andrews. I thought similarly when before when they were in 21 personnel, this year actually they ran the ball a bit more, but they were very, very effective throwing out of those looks. I think the next thing we're going to see is better integration of the run and the pass when they are in 11, because they still mostly pass the ball out of those looks. So you didn't really see, like with the Ravens, I thought, okay, now that they've got these wide receivers, we're going to see them spread the field out and run with that spatial advantage. And you didn't quite see that last year. And to me, that's going to be kind of like the next thing you can potentially see. But for the most part, I thought, the run pass tells weren't as dramatic as they were. And as a result, the pass game building off of the run was much more effective. Sorry, that was a lot of numbers and word salad. So,
and I'm just going to chime in with more numbers. Like, to your point, I have a stat about like how defenses found it awkward to match up with the personnel when Ricard was out there. Opposing defenses treat him like a fullback in terms of matching personnel. When they were in base personnel, they matched 88% of the time when Ricard was on the field. And there were like 11 personnel sets. There were 12 personnel sets. Whenever any other team had a fullback on the field, that number is 30%. So 58% higher rate of matching personnel when Ricard is out there. And like you said, Monken used that brilliantly to me. Like, he put Ricard on the line of scrimmage. He used him basically as a sixth offensive lineman, like a third offensive tackle. And he was like giving him Aiden Hutchinson on his own, one-on-one. Like, those are like the screenshots we tweet out, and we're like, why would you ever do this as an offensive coordinator who was working with Ricard? And that just gave Lamar more time to operate in the pocket, which I think he does need. I think the one criticism you can make of him as a drop back passer is he does need to speed up his process a little bit. But I also think, I agree with you. I think they're going to spread things out more. If you read the tea leaves of kind of what they're saying, Lamar lost weight, and it's not because they're not going to use him as a design runner. I think they want him to scramble more. Like, a lot of their explosive plays were from him scrambling. And if you listen to Todd Monken talk about his philosophy on offense, he talks about the value of being able to spread things out and then having a running quarterback, and how much stress that puts on you spatially for defense, and how that opens up things. And when you think about the Ravens and Lamar's fit in this offense in the past couple of years, this is maybe the best space player we've ever seen in the NFL, and they put him in a box. And I think this is the first year we're going to get to see him come out of that box and really get to play in a true spread offense in the NFL.
Yeah, we talked about this with the quarterback draft, but it's kind of remarkable that in a year where Lamar Jackson visually was clearly not even running like that hard, he still like dominated a bunch of statistics. And as you said, like, I do think that there's something strategic about him wanting to lose weight, wanting to run a little bit more. The only thing that, like I said, the offensive line is the concern I have. And then the other thing is, like, I really liked what I saw from Zay Flowers, but if Rashad Bateman doesn't take another step, this is still a wide receiver group that doesn't match up well with every group of, every secondary. You saw that, I think, in the playoffs too, when they ran into more physical cornerbacks. And I think part of the reason why, even with improved wide receivers, and I really did think Zay Flowers was still good, they were not effective throwing the ball out of 11%. They were very effective running the ball. They just didn't run it very often. But throwing the ball, they were actually in 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers on the field, 20th in EPA per play, behind the Denver Broncos. So that feels like that's still like the missing piece with this offense. I feel like if Lamar Jackson is really, really dynamic scrambling out of those looks, however, that should make things easier for the pass game.
Yeah. Can I make a pitch for the offensive line? I know they've lost pieces, but I think there's a chance that this offensive line has a higher ceiling than last year's offensive line. Like Andrew Voorhees is replacing John Simpson at left guard. He was a 7th round pick, I think. But before he injured himself during the pre-draft cycle, like he was seen as a 1st round pick. There's a very good chance that this guy is a decent player at left guard, which I think could be an upgrade over John Simpson. And then Rosengarten, I don't think he's going to be a better pass protector than Morgan Moses was, which was kind of an issue for Moses, but he does profile as like a road grading runner, run blocker who could give them a little more physicality at the point of attack. One thing I will say about the offensive line, after the Chiefs game, Drew Tranquil told me in the locker room, he was like, they had nothing at the point of attack. Like they were getting no movement at the point of attack. We just dominated them. And that's why they stopped running the football, in his opinion. Yeah. So I do think getting nastier on the offensive line could serve a purpose in January.
By the way, Patrick Ricard, I think I had him as first team All-Pro. I feel like he had like one of the all-time fullback seasons, and it's kind of been slept on. He was unbelievable last year.
Him and Ingold from Miami.
Yeah.
2 key players to their offenses.
Okay, who do you have? So do you have the Packers at 4? Because I have them at 5.
I do not. I have the Lions.
Okay, so I have the Lions at 6. I mean, I couldn't decide. I had the Lions over the Packers, and then somebody bullied me into switching it. I think it was Greg. I'm blaming Greg because I said my rankings, and he was like, I don't know, the Packers. And I was like, oh, I don't know.
I feel bad about having Detroit this high, too. Like, having Jared Goff over Jordan Love feels blasphemous to me, but.
I don't know. I'm going to switch and join you. I'm going to put the Packers the Lions back at 5. I don't know. They're very close to me.
Here's my explanation. I thought last year going into it, I thought Ben Johnson, it was going to be hard for Ben Johnson to follow up what he had done the year before. And I would argue that he was even more impressive last year. I don't think they were as reliant on play action passing as they were the year before. I think he found a way to kind of fill in that gap, not needing to run play action to still get the same production out of Jared Goff and like create windows over the middle, which I think is where Jared Goff is at his best, attacking those windows. And then just the weaponization of Sewell as this season went on last year, I think he's going to expand upon that. And the run game is going to be even harder to defend next year. So I know there are questions about regression with any offense, especially one with a quarterback who's closer to average than he is, top of the league, elite. But retaining Ben Johnson, I think, was one of the biggest wins of the offseason. And totally. I don't see any reason to question why they would take a major step back from last year when they were a top 5 offense.
There's no changes on the roster. The only concern I would have is if there was a really serious injury in the offensive line, but the offensive line is very deep. I guess if Sewell got hurt, because, they do so much cool stuff with him in the run game in particular, that would, that would definitely be difficult to overcome. But again, like Dan Skipper is a good backup, so I think for me, with the Lions, so like, what's the difference between them, like in a San Francisco, how do you get them into that top 3 versus in that next tier where we have them, similarly to San Francisco and some of the better offenses in football, because they are so damn good at running the ball. They face a ton of single high coverage. San Francisco, however, averages like 0.27 EPA per play throwing the ball on those, and the Lions, it drops to 0.13. They're leaving a lot of explosive opportunities on the table that are created by their run game, which is to say, because offense defenses are so frightened of their run game, there's so much grass out there, but they haven't been able to tap into that. And you could say maybe it's Jared Goff. Is he pushing the ball downfield? I really think it's been, though, more so the skill players, and the way, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and Jared Goff, you're always going to have a disproportionate of throws to the middle of the field in particular. But this is a team that, as efficient as their offense was, ranked dead last in the NFL in the percentage of plays over 20 air yards, second lowest in vertical routes. If Jamison Williams can be even 80% of the guy that he looked like in college, to me, that takes this already great offense to that next level. But it's a question mark. Dan Campbell's talking him up this offseason. We'll see. I just think that, to me, is like that little missing piece that would put them over the edge.
Yeah, 66% of their explosive plays were run plays last year. For the For the Chargers, that number was 87%. Or were pass plays. Sorry. That's one of the lowest numbers in the league. 66% is one of the lowest numbers in the league. Like teams at the top, the Chiefs, for instance, 81% of their explosive plays were pass plays. So I do think that is the seal. Like that's where they can evolve. And it comes down to Jameson Williams. Like that's the only question mark. Is he going to be a player that can carry that load? Because it is a big burden on one receiver, especially one who hasn't played a lot of football over the last couple of years, has been banged up. But even if they don't have that, I just think Ben Johnson is so good at drawing up plays that lead to yak and kind of fill in those gaps where they're not getting explosives in the pass game with St. Brown and Laporta. I think he's going to be even better this year. So I think their floor is where I'm concerned, but like their median performance, I think is going to stay the same and maybe even get a little bit better this year.
Okay. So it seems like we do see them as the Packers and Lions as being pretty neck and neck. Packers to me, it's like, the quarterback. I don't think I need to get more. We don't need to do another Jordan Love fest after Nate Tice took him 5th overall in our quarterback draft. Very spicy. Speaking of spicy picks, I guess my question for you, as far as the Packers go, is there anything that worries you in terms of like regression? Given that we had like this elite half a season from Jordan Love, and that of course he's playing with like a very young group of pass catchers, one that notably they didn't add to at all this offseason.
No, I really don't. I have no fear of regression whatsoever. And it's because of the tape. Like you watch the tape, that was a high quality offense.
Yeah.
There was like nothing questionable about their production. They could do a lot of things. I think this version of the offense is even better than the version of the offense they had when Aaron Rodgers was an MVP under LaFleur. Because you have the under center stuff that Aaron Rodgers famously didn't like. He didn't like to turn his back to the defense. Jordan Love has been developed in this offense under Matt LaFleur. The first thing he had to learn how to do was take a snap from under center and learn how to turn his back to the defense and run play action. And it's something he's been working on for the last 3 years before he finally got his start. And then I think you saw Matt LaFleur. This was his best season as a coach to me. This was his most impressive season. There were some early growing pains with the offense, with the receivers running the wrong routes. They were kind of trying to figure out their identity, how to mesh like the shotgun stuff with the under center stuff. But in the second half, it came together. Jordan Love, like on film, like you watch the film too. Do you see anything that makes it seem like his breakout in the second half was fake? If anything, I think he could be even better this year because of the untapped potential.
I felt the same way with him and Stroud. Like I think both had a little bit of turnover luck for sure.
Yeah.
In the second part of the season because they were both really freaking aggressive. But it's not, I feel the same way about both of them. It's not fake offense. Like they're both making really difficult throws. I guess if I had a question about Packers, maybe, there's the offensive line, there's some evolution here. It sounds like Jordan Morgan might start. So that could potentially be an issue. They seem to have this like uncanny ability to integrate any offensive lineman and make it play any position, and they're awesome. But that would be a thing. Josh Jacobs replacing Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was hurt. It was a signing. It was a decision I didn't really understand, but I don't see that as being like a downgrade really necessarily. No. I think they're both good players. I like Aaron Jones for the Vikings as well. But yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I think the reason, like if you're debating Packers versus Lions, I guess the Lions offensive line is deeper, and I think we're now off of like 2 years of elite offensive play. So that would be the case to be made. But I mean, I'm very high on both of these offenses.
If Luke Musgrave is like a Pro Bowl level tight end, which I'm not keeping off the table. I think that's very much in the cards, or could be in the cards. I would put them third. I think that's the one. They don't have as many dudes as the Lions do. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't like some guy that's going to tilt the defense by any means, but he's a guy you can rely on. He's like a star who kind of fudges the numbers a little bit. Like he makes up for a deficincy elsewhere. I think Laporta is on his way to being that too, just based on the style of tight end he is and what he does after the catch. But if they have Musgrave, if Musgrave like emerges as that guy, and this dude, oh my God, like seeing him run in training camp last year was amazing in person. Like a big dude who could just run, smart as hell too. Like he earned reps early, which is hard to do as a tight end, especially in that offense. So I could see a big breakout year for him. And then my one concern with Jordan Love, and it's not a real concern, as I'm going to explain, is he did have great numbers under pressure. And as we know, that's volatile year to year. But I think he created that with his creativity as a passer. Like the back foot stuff is not going to go away. And that's a big reason why he handled pressure so well. The sidearm throws, that's not going to go away. And that's another reason he handled pressure so well. The no look passes and all that. Like he creates throws in this offense that you don't see other quarterbacks in this style of offense do. And that's why I'm so high on him.
His pressured, unpressured numbers are pretty similar, which is a very Josh Allen-y quarterback split that you don't see very often.
Yeah.
But he also, in the second half of the season, was first in QBR from inside the pocket, which it speaks to a few things. I thought, the offensive line is very, very good, but also his ability to manage a pocket, I thought, was one of the most impressive qualities that he showed. All right, let's take a quick break, come back, and get through the teams that we haven't already mentioned.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer: hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire.
Okay, so just to recap, your 1 through 5.
I have 49ers. Who was my second team? That's Chiefs, Texans, Lions, and then the Dolphins are my 5th team. I don't think I said
okay.
my 5th team.
We skipped that. Sorry. Okay, so you have the Dolphins 5. I had the Packers, Lions above them. And then so you have the Packers 6.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Trying to keep track of everything. We have a lot of the same teams. They're just in like slightly different orders. I have the Dolphins 7th. So my total cop out is I was like, well, are we counting at the end of the year, or are we doing regular season top? Because if it was regular season top 10, I would probably have them in the top 4. And I don't think that's hard. Like, you kind of can't argue with that, frankly. So I guess my question to you about the Dolphins, because we certainly know the case for putting them in the top. This was an unbelievably explosive offense that returns all the skill players and made, in fact, some additions. Do you feel good about, do you think that they have done anything, or there's anything can be done to address some of the issues we've seen in cold weather or at the end of the season?
I don't think they've done anything to address it necessarily. I think that's going to have to come behind the scenes with like Mike McDaniel altering the scheme a little bit in January. But the reason why I'm a little more optimistic about them, despite the lack of changes, and they have lost pieces actually, is I think skinny Tua is going to be a factor. I think it's going to matter. I really do. I'm buying into the offseason hype, this offseason storyline. And let me explain why. Tua has not been this weight since his rookie year and since Alabama.
Yeah.
And if you go back and watch Tua rookie year, he is creating out of structure. Like, he's making off-platform throws. He's scrambling more often. And I think if he returns to that, and if that's on their mind, and their coaches have said this is part of the reason he has lost weight, so he could be more mobile, be more elusive in the pocket, and extend plays. If he does return to his form in his rookie season, go back and watch the Cardinals game from his rookie season, and you'll be like, I did not know this Tua had this in his game. I didn't know he created plays after stuff broke down, but he did in that game. If he can get a little bit of that back, I think it just unlocks so much for this offense. Because when you watch their bad games, I went back and watched all their bad games from this past year. That's the common denominator, is the defense just drops everyone into coverage, has everything taken away, usually playing 2-man. They see the most 2-man out of any offense in the league. The way to beat 2-man is to scramble, and Tua just never did it. He would just check down instead, and you just can't do that. You lose the high-level plays that you need to sustain an offense like this. And I think if they can get something different from him this year, it's going to make that offense a lot better.
So that mobility that he flashed, because was the hip injury, right, coming out of college,
if
I remember correctly, but this was after that.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, it is interesting, right? Because I think we think of Tua as not being one of the mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, but you're right. When you think back to him when he was younger, he did have a scrambling ability that's maybe a little bit closer to like a Joe Burrow type.
Yeah,
and
right.
As you said, like, teams don't play 2-man against the Bengals because of Joe Burrow and his scrambling ability. And if Tua can do that, it completely changes a lot of the issues, I think, that we see sometimes towards the end of the season. And that's the thing with the Dolphins, right? they don't have to, he doesn't have to be like a dual threat quarterback. He doesn't have to be a wizard against pressure. He doesn't have to be Josh Allen. He just needs to be sort of average against those things because the rest of the machine is what it is. And if he can do that, you're right. It's a game changer for them.
It's just it's like an extra constraint on the defense that they haven't had to worry about. And like they've been able to sell out to stop Tyreek Hill. They've been able to sell out Jalen Waddle. And we've seen how effective that has been. It hasn't been effective at all for defenses, but the few times it has, it's been because Tua has not been able to create after the play breaks down. And I honestly think like this will help. In his rookie year, that was the last time. It was the only time in his career that he reached over 18 miles per hour. He hasn't even come close to that in the 3 years since then. So let's see if it happens this year.
You sometimes see him do it in the red zone. It's part of why I think he's actually like a very good red zone quarterback is he kind of, you see him go into creator mode a little bit. Some of my favorite Tua highlights over the last 2 years with the Mike McDaniel era have been in the low red zone in particular when he has escaped and then made a good throw outside of the pocket. And it's like, okay, well, maybe if we saw a little bit more of that in the rest of the football field, I think it would be massive for this offense. And it would be certainly a point in giving him the kind of contract that he's expecting.
Yeah. And I think like in the open field that is even more effective, or that's even more hurtful to a defense just because you have more space to deal with.
For sure. Okay. So I had them 7. So, I had the Packers and Lions, just to recap where I am at, because I know it's just a little bit confusing. I got the Niners, the Chiefs, the Niners, the Rams, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Lions, the Packers, the Dolphins. So I think we're at 7 for you. I think it was one of the teams we already talked about though, right?
Yeah, we talked about the Ravens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're both 8, 9, 10. I've already revealed one of mine, which was I had the Texans at 9. Who do you have at 8?
I have Cincinnati, and I thought this would be a spicier take. I thought you would have Cincinnati in the top 5. So I'm kind of interested to see like what your take is here.
I had them at 10. I know. Oh, Bengals fans, don't be mad at me. It was really a matter of like, I just couldn't, I kept trying to push down the Texans and the team I have at 8, and I just couldn't do it. This could be totally incorrect. Let's talk about the Bengals here though, because I alluded to this. What they did outside of Joe Burrow, I found fascinating last year. And so I mentioned at the top, they were able to sustain like a pretty efficient offense. Some of that had to do with Jake Browning. Listen, Shaq, I wasn't familiar with your game. That dude was so much better than I thought he would be coming out of college. That I was not high. I mean, I'm a UW fan. I did not think he would be good in the NFL. And I thought he was actually pretty damn good. I think he's one of the better backups in the entire league now. So that's part of it. Also, similarly to Joe Burrow, he gets to play with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I was really impressed with those guys when Burrow went out as well. Chase in particular, I was like, because he had to do a lot of real like dirty work, like just like RPOs, screens, and like I'll just say this, like with Chase, I really think like they're gonna obviously pay him a ton, and he has flashed really high end play, but like not all receivers would be sustain that level of compete once the quarterback went out. So I was very impressed by him. But I think, Steven, what was so fascinating to me was just sort of the evolution of their offense, which we know with Joe Burrow is this very put him in the gun, spread it out, let him pick his poison, and the run game flows out of that. With Browning, they had him they didn't go under center a lot, but it went from 9% to 22%, which is about as dramatic as you get, in the NFL. And they sort of mixed up the run game a little bit more, which again had been very gun based with Burrow, and it worked. So I think my question for you is, are there any lessons from the second half of the season that you think can be applied? And also, do they need to be applied? Because with Burrow, this has obviously been an incredibly good offense.
So this has been the thing I've been thinking about with this team all offseason. And just to add more numbers, explosive plays from under center when Burrow is out there, 0 explosive plays from under center.
He's never under center.
but literally 0% of their plays from under center were explosive plays. With Browning, it was 16%, which is like a top of the league number. Wow. So I think the lesson here is let's lean into this offense a little more. Let's give some more schematic help to Joe Burrow. But the issue is that Joe Burrow very famously does not like to be under center, and he does not like to turn it's the same as the Aaron Rodgers thing. Like, he likes to be in the gun. He likes to spread things out. And I think finding a middle ground there, like, I would like to see more pistol out of them. We saw them dabble in it when Burrow was hurt and couldn't like take the full drops from under center. And it worked for the most part, but they just never went back to it. My one concern, though, is they lose Brian Callahan, who is their OC. Obviously, Zach Taylor's the play caller. But I do wonder if a little bit of that under center offense goes along with Callahan to Tennessee, and maybe we see Zach Taylor just kind of give Joe Burrow the reins again, and they run this offense, which I think is very good when it's on. Like, when Joe Burrow is hot, they're the best offense in the NFL. They have a little bit of that like Russ era Seattle to them, where like Seattle would go through these like cold streaks, and they'd have these games where they score like, like one touchdown. And then they'd have these other games where Russ is like 22 for 25 for 4 touchdowns. And I think that's the kind of zone they're in. And maybe the reason for that is sort of similar. Like, both of those quarterbacks like to be in the gun, and they like to run around and extend plays. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a hard balance to kind of find. And I don't know if Zach Taylor's the guy that finds it.
Yeah, and it's such a matchups-based offense, but what happens when you take T. Higgins out of that equation versus more of a schemed-up offense, which is, all of the offenses we've been talking about up till this point have been very heavily schemed-up offenses. Mm-hmm. Some of them have mutants at quarterback, and and that takes that to another level, or they have like unbelievable skill players. The Bengals, like the Eagles, are not. And I would say to some degree the Bills at point. So the question I think that they have to ask is, do we have to make that evolution when we lose our 1A wide receiver? And I think that was the other thing that gave me a little bit of pause. Higgins is playing this year, but there's like weird. I don't know.
It is weird.
It's a little weird. I know they drafted Jermaine Burton, added Mike Gesicki. I like Zach Moss, who's replacing Joe Mixon. I actually think he could be pretty good in this particular scheme. But if they do continue running out of the gun with the gap stuff that they do,
the offseason additions is what gives me a little bit of pause. Like, you don't bring in Mike Gesicki to go under center and run the ball more. You don't bring in a slot receiver like Jermaine Burton to run the ball more. Like, they had the opportunity with Tyler Boyd leaving to kind of move on from the 11 personnel spread stuff, and then they draft Jermaine Burton, and that kind of goes away.
Ultimately, though, why the case I made to myself was not really like, oh, Higgins might be surly, but rather Joe Burrow coming off another major injury really affected him last season. Until the very end, when he had 2 awesome games and then he got hurt again. So it's just like, okay, you're losing another season. He's been so good that I don't doubt that he can play at that level again, but it's not insignificant. Okay, so I had them at 10 and I had the Texans at 9. So maybe this is spicy, the team I have at 8. I got the Bills at 8.
You think that's spicy?
I don't know. Think it's spicy. This is like the off season of like freaking out about the Cowboys and the Bills, which is, I work in TV. So, but obviously they just traded away one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. They're rolling out a rookie. I went on this Bills pod, disguised coverage it's a Cover One podcast, and we got into this at length, and I really enjoyed going through the Bills splits before and after Dorsey and trying to think about the Joe Brady offense and what it could look like next year. And when you split it up in a half a season, you don't see like the Dolphins was like incredibly efficient before and actually was kind of less efficient in some ways afterwards. But you're inserting a new offensive coordinator at the midpoint, all of that. What I found interesting, Steven, was sort of some of the philosophical changes and whether or not they're going to carry over this year. The most dramatic being the willingness, not just the ability, they had the ability before, but the willingness to run the football into advantageous run looks. Obviously, some of that was with Josh Allen too. And then just how dominant the run game looked. I think my question for Buffalo this year is, Can you build off of that? Can you build a pass game off of that very, very good run game, like a very good play action passing attack, RPO based attack? And then I think sort of the evolution that, we just alluded to, which is like going from being a matchups based offense to being one that's more schemed up. This is an offense where correctly, a lot of it was just asking Josh Allen to cook, Stephon Diggs. It wasn't a very motion centric offense. So I think it's like you look at this group of personnel, which is very, very different. With now hopefully healthy Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, you can use your tight ends more often. You've got big wide receivers, Keon Coleman. Or are you going to be like a different offense, maybe more like some of the offenses we talked about in the top half?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of the evolution we saw with the Packers last year, where like they went from the spread RPO stuff to more schemed up stuff. And then even like Seattle 2 years ago with Geno Smith, I thought that was the reason why, while it seemed like they took a step back at quarterback, I thought the offense would get better because of what Geno Smith allows them to do. I don't think it's the quarterback necessarily here, because Josh Allen can go under center. He's comfortable doing that. But Brady, from his time in Carolina, at least, that's what I'm basing this off of. That's what, like, when he got good play out of Sam Darnold for like that first month when they started 3-0 and he got all crazy and traded for Stephon Gilmore. The one thing he did well was under center play action boot stuff. It was running back option plays out of the backfield with Christian McCaffrey and then boot stuff with Sam Darnold. I think if he brings that to Josh Allen, who's a far better quarterback than Darnold, and I think they have better wide receiver personnel, I do think there's a chance that this offense actually takes a step forward this year, even though on paper it seems like they're due for a massive step back. But we may not see it until December and January is my one concern. That's when we see the fruits of this. I have to ask, though, am I like getting social media pilled by Keon Coleman and all this content coming out from him? Because now I'm like all in. I have not watched any tape from him from Florida State, but I'm like, this guy's going to be a star.
Yeah. You haven't watched any Keon Coleman tape?
I was writing about March Madness. I didn't do my regular draft prep.
It was an interesting watch because he had that week 1 game against LSU where it's like, oh my God, there might be a reckless tweet from me about how actually, I think it was more than just like he's going in the first round. He did go in the first, so yeah. Or no, he was taken at the beginning of the second. No, they took him in the first round.
Yeah,
because they traded down in the Chiefs. Yeah. So he is. I think what makes this so interesting is they traded Stephon Diggs, and then they drafted a guy who's just nothing like him.
Mm-hmm.
And Keon Coleman he kind of reminds me a little bit of Brandon Marshall, honestly, which is high praise if people remember the peak of Brandon Marshall's career. Very physical, very large contested catchability. There's question marks about whether or not that's due to a lack of separation. Was saddled with some pretty bad quarterback play, in my opinion, that kind of made him a tough eval at times. I think he moves better than he's given credit for. Also, he had not great athletic testing numbers at the combine. But I am not 100% sure how best to deploy him. I guess it kind of falls into place when you look at the rest of their skill players. Khalil Shakir being the guy who stretches the field, Curtis Samuel being your yak guy. So Keon Coleman could be like that intermediate threat for them. And certainly a guy who's going to be very good in the red zone. I'm very curious to see, though, if they do make this transition to being a more 12 personnel heavy team, more condensed formations, more of that, stuff, play action game going from under center. Can he block for them? Like what? Like, no, I mean, I'm very interested in seeing also just, I think target share wise, they had moved so much off of Diggs already by the end of the season that I don't think it's going to be hard to, like, it's not like they're going from the offense where Stephon Diggs was CeeDee Lamb. They had already sort of democratized the offense last year. So I guess that's part of the reason why I'm like optimistic about them is I think this is just kind of a continued evolution of something that was already in the works.
Right.
Thing about the Bills that like quietly flies under the radar is just like, I thought the offensive line was excellent last season. Deion Dawkins is really good. I know one of our last memories of him is getting dog walked by Chris Jones back into Josh Allen's foot. I think that was Dawkins, if I remember correctly. But that to me, the fact that I expect them to continue to be very good on the ground makes everything so much easier for this offense if they build off of that.
And like they spread things out, certainly, and they were more like structurally, they would like fit into like the spread RPO teams, like kind of like Philadelphia, but they did more stuff in the ground game than I think they got credit for, even under Dorsey, with like pulling guards and like trap plays and stuff like that. So like these players have had reps running a diverse run game. So I would like to see how that looks under center, but that is the big question. Can you block? Can you create movement at the line of scrimmage? If they can, I think this offense could be just as good as it was last year and the year before.
Where did you have them?
I had them 10th.
Okay. So who have we missed for you? So you had 7.
I have the Cowboys.
Okay. So the odd man out for you from my list, who do you not have, who I said? So I went 7 Miami, 8 Bills, 9 Texans, 10 Bengals.
I don't know who I did.
Here, wait. Sorry, I know the way I do this is really confusing. Run me through your top 10.
Yeah, let me listen. I have to scroll through. All right, I have Chiefs. All right, 49ers, Chiefs. Texans 3rd, Lions 4th. Dolphins 5th. Or no, Packers 5th. Dolphins 6th. Ravens 7th. Sorry, I have a lot of notes for the Ravens. Bengals 8th. Oh, I excluded the Rams from my list. I had 2 different lists, and I had the Rams. So I do have 10. So the Cowboys, I guess, are 11.
You don't think the Rams are going to be in the top 10 offense?
No, I had them. I just forgot when I listed.
Oh, okay.
I overlooked them. I had 11 teams.
You got to bump someone out. No, this is cheating. You can't do that.
I know. I'm bumping the Cowboys. I'll take the Cowboys.
You're bumping the Cowboys. Yeah, the Cowboys were on the outside looking in for me. Okay. So that's your top 10 and my top 10. Just to I'll do mine again, just to remind folks. Niners, Rams, it's my spicy pick. Chiefs, Ravens, Lions, Packers. I got bullied back into switching them. Dolphins, Bills, Texans, Bengals. So on the outside looking in, I have the Eagles, Cowboys, and Seahawks. Which by the way shouldn't be like I think they finished 12th last year or something, or what was it? Top.
They were 10th in EPA.
Well, yeah. Okay. So that's just to, I guess, go quickly through those 3 teams and why they didn't make the top 10 for me. Am I leaving anyone out? Do you think that's just outside looking in?
I have Atlanta on my list too. And this is just like me being a bit of a hype beast, but I had Indianapolis because of Steichen and Anthony Richardson.
My sleeper one is the Cardinals because I think they're going to have such a dominant run game. But the 3 that I really feel like, you could make a case for them. I mean, Eagles and Cowboys. And then, so the Eagles for me, just, did you see that? I can't remember. Someone posted this today that like Kellen Moore is like, it's 90% a new offense or something.
95%. Okay. Yeah.
So in some ways good. In other ways, like, I gotta wait and see. That I feel like Eagles, if it truly is as dramatic of a scheme change as we expect, I also want to see, just frankly, and I think we'll see this very early on. Did you solve the blitz problem? I think we'll get a sense of that pretty quickly. If so, then they should probably be a top 10 offense. I just need to see it. Cowboys for me was just the offensive line. I mean, you're rolling out potentially 2 rookies, one very raw one at left tackle. That I feel like is reason enough to put them outside the top 10. Seahawks, I'm very excited about the coordinator change, but I guess that's another one where I want to see the interior of the offensive line, which was really derailed this offense last year.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I'm a little skeptical about the Eagles, but beyond like them learning a new offense, I think losing Kelsey is a big deal. I think it might be like the biggest loss of the offseason. He was their best player on either side of the ball. He was their most important player. Like the way he handled protections, the way he got that run game and the right looks, the way he got like the tush push. I think he was a big part of that success, which was a big deal for them. That kept them on the field and probably kept them in the top 10 of EPA last year. Losing him, I think, is going to be a big thing to overcome, especially learning a new offense where it's not just like you're going from a typical NFL offense to a robust NFL offense. You're going from a bare bones NFL offense to one of the most complicated offenses in the sport right now. And I think that's going to take a long time, especially for Jalen Hurts and those wide receivers to get on the same page with all the like option routes in that offense and all the route conversions you have to do based on coverage. I could see the first 2 months as being really ugly for them.
Yeah, that to me is going to be one of the more fascinating coaching changes in the entire NFL. And I think it's telling, all of the top 10, both of our top 10s, which ultimately the same teams, continuity is kind of the key word. And the one, I mentioned Joe Brady, but they had half a season with him. And there might be, some improvements upon what we saw in the second half of the season, in my opinion. Okay. Well, final question I have for you. 4 teams. If you had to pick one of these teams to finish as a top 10 offense, who would you buy?
Okay.
The Bears, the Vikings, the Jets, the Chargers.
Whew, this is a tough one. I'm going to take the Bears. I know there's going to be some growing pains for Caleb Williams, but I just think that offense has it, man. I think they have all the pieces they need. I think Caleb I don't think he's as raw as people think. I think his game is more polished than people give him credit for. But I'm also not sleeping on the Jets. I've been kind of tooting their horn all season. If they stay healthy, I think this is a team that could get to the AFC title game.
If they're healthy, yeah.
If they're healthy, which is a big if, obviously.
Yeah. Greg and I would talk about them. We actually both settled on Mike Williams as the X factor because they actually have some depth at offensive tackle. If you get a full season of Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson is insane, like a really good duo. With
Aaron Rodgers, like the king of the back shoulder throw to Mike Williams, like I think it's a big deal that they have Mike Williams in particular. It's kind of like what T. Higgins brings to the Bengals offense. The X factor for me is the MetLife turf.
Yeah.
Oh. That's the X factor.
Which fan base is going to be the angriest? I feel like Bengals.
It's the Bengals. With me. The Bengals and the Dolphins. Surprisingly, I was the one that had the Bengals and Dolphins higher on my list. I'm the hero of this story. You're the bad boy of NFL internet now.
I'm sorry. Don't yell at me. They're in the top 10. I'll probably be wrong. All right. Well, that was great. Tune in next week for top 10 defenses, which is much harder. And look, we had the same 10 teams. I don't think that's going to happen with defenses. But I'm looking forward to that. I always look forward to listening to you. Steven Ruiz, tell folks where they can find your work.
You can find me on The Ringer. I'm potting with Deontay Lee now. Very excited about that. Newest member of The Ringer. So listen to that.
Awesome. And one quick, before I let you go, we're asking people for content recommendations for things that they are enjoying watching, reading, anything in the off season.
You like slot reality television, right? Like you watch Love is Blind and stuff. Traders on Peacock. If you have Peacock for the NFL season, it's so good. And watch the British one. The British one is the best one.
Okay, but there's some Bachelor people on Trader, or there was this past season. I was
surprisingly, Peter, the pilot
B,
the best player of the season.
Amazing. We are watching a kind of a trashy Netflix show. I didn't even know. I'm so late to it. Money Heist. Did you ever watch that?
No, I've seen the first episode, but I didn't get into it.
It's pretty dumb, but it's super entertaining. I am really liking it. So I would recommend people check that out if you're looking for something mindless and fun to watch while you exercise. All right, that's it for today. Thank you as always to the folks at Omaha Productions for producing this. Kirsten Sebecki, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor. One of those things where Owen Saylor, Jack Foster. And you can check this out at youtube.com/@MinaKimes. Please click subscribe if you're there, or watch it on ESPN 2 on Wednesdays. Thank you so much, Steven.